Users of Reddit, what dark secret are you hiding from everyone? My stepdad tried to kill me when I was little. TW for domestic violence and language. My stepdad was a grade A asshole. He was in my life from the beginning. After my bio dad up and left, till I was about 13-14, he was an abusive, alcoholic, jobless dickwad who constantly physically and verbally abused both my mom and I. On multiple occasions either my mom or I called the cops and watched them drag the sorry sack of shit out the house and throw him in jail for a couple of days. They were sadly the happiest days of my childhood. When I was little I can remember countless times where I had gotten into physical fights with the man, resulting in black eyes, cuts, bruises, the works. I won't go into detail any further, since it's kinda hard to talk about, but I will say this, I never told anyone about this. This is the first time I've gotten it down in writing or out in the open at all. When I was little, 5-6 years old I'd say, I lived with my mom and stepdad in my stepdad's parents' attic. My mom frequently went out during the day for work, and didn't come home till late evening or night. Well, one day, after my parents had a pretty hostile argument, my mom left for work and my dad was pretty pent up. This is what I remember, and continue to remember almost every day since the event. My dad took one of those large, heavy-duty trash bags out of his parents' kitchen, dragged me into the living room of the attic, stuffed me in the bag, and tied it after letting out some air. I remember being terrified, too scared to act out of fear of getting hit or yelled at. I waited till I heard him close the attic door, then proceeded to use my fingers to claw a hole through the trash bag. I remember it taking a while, since I wasn't that strong at the time due to malnourishment and well, my age, but I eventually made it out and laid on the floor just waiting for my mom to get home. I'd if she knows what happened, if she just thought I was playing with a trash bag or what. But that's what I remember and I've been carrying it for years. Thankfully she eventually left that dirt bag and I can now happily say I have an amazing father who I love very much. So this story does have a happy ending. Thanks for reading my little vent. I'm kinda terrified to post this but getting it out finally will do me some good. When I was young, probably around age 9 or 10, I was walking home with my dog from a house around the block when he cut the corner and walked diagonally through the yard of this super mean old lady who live at the end of your street. She was in her yard at the time tending to these really fancy looking rose bushes she had growing in beds along the border with her neighbor. My dog was a very friendly golden retriever who didn't even really come near her and certainly didn't do anything threatening, but she sprayed the fuck out of him with some kind of insecticide or other chemical she was using on her roses. I ran back home with the dog and hosed him off. He coughed a bunch, but seemed otherwise fine. I didn't tell my parents because somehow I thought I was going to get into trouble for letting the dog walk in her yard. I'm glad I didn't tell them, though, because I decided that night to sneak downstairs, out the half-bath window, and down the street to her yard where I cut down every goddamn rose bush I could get my hands on. When I was younger I lived with my grandmother. Not long after I turned 18 her health started to decline. That sort of decline that you know means she won't be around for much longer. Over the months I did my best to take care of her, getting her to the hospital when she needed, and other things. We had someone coming every day to help her with things I couldn't. Well, what my family doesn't know is that the night she passed, I was in the living room watching TV. My dog was in bed with my grandma, and I started to hear him whimper and bark. I knew what was happening. I knew that if I acted I could potentially save her. I didn't want to watch her suffer anymore though, to watch her live with so much pain, and unable to do anything for herself anymore. So I made the choice to let her pass before making any calls. She lived 92 years. And the only regret I have is that she passed a month after I would have graduated if I hadn't been kicked out of school. She had been in good enough health at the time to go to my graduation. I still kick myself for how stupid I was back then. Edit. I didn't expect this much support. Thanks. I'm not too torn up about letting her pass. I knew it was for the best. She was such a great person. She didn't deserve to live in such a poor manner any longer than she already had. I don't regret what I did. I regret what I had done that got me kicked out of school. That I didn't try and make it to graduation for her. I think I've lived my life so far in a way that she'd be proud of. Not graduating before she passed is the only regret I really have in this life so far, and I'm 35 now, so I think I'm doing pretty good. My wife, her mom and I bought a house about 2 years ago. Just from talking to the neighbors I'd gathered that the family who lived here before had a daughter that was mixed up with the wrong people. We had some random person knock on our door at night saying he needed gas. We are down a long driveway. No way you'd randomly walk up to our house to ask for help. I think he was looking for the people who used to live here. And then another time Sunday morning making pancakes for the family I get a knock on the door and it's 4 sheriff's officers saying they received a 911 call that hung up and it was from the house. We don't have a landline and I assured them my wife and 2-year-old did not make any call. They mentioned a name of the previous occupants and I let them know we moved in earlier this year and they seemed okay with it and left. Anyways, I was doing some yard work and struck up conversation with the neighbor. He saw the police cars and asked what was up. I told him the situation and he just goes, oh yeah, that family was messed up. The cops were probably being cautious considering the shooting. What shooting, I ask. He kinda looks at me with a sad worried face. The shooting in your house. Wait, what? I say, truly baffled. He then proceeds to tell me that about 2 years before the father in the house confronted his daughter and boyfriend he didn't like and shot and killed the boyfriend in the house. Our state doesn't have a disclosure law so we never knew. I was blown away. All the strange happenings kinda made sense now. He said the friends of the victim had kinda terrorized them for a while cause the police were taking so long to press charges. Slashed tears. Midnight fireworks, odd shit that the neighbors hated. I was shocked but just said that's crazy. But hey, do me a favor and never tell my wife or Mill about that. They are a little spooked by things like that. So the TRDL is that we live in a murder house and I'm the only one of my family that knows. In high school, I was a super good kid, straight A student who loved homework, keeping out of trouble, and who was quiet as hell during class. So anyway, there was this guy who was also in AP classes with me but he was super loud and obnoxious but would pull stunts in such a way that he would have some margin of plausible deniability. Though we never spoke, I'm not sure he even knew I existed. He rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was from the one cold day when this other girl in our class had her nipples poking through her shirt. BC she forgot a sweater and he kept saying to her, damn it's cold. Huh? Maybe it was from when he would pretend to be friends with kid who was definitely spectrum and desperate to be friends with him to do the bully's homework for him and then bully him the next day. So at random sometimes once a week or a month or once every couple of months I would whistle. It's this high-pitched whistle that sounds like a tea kettle that I can do while barely moving my mouth. Back then, no one knew I could do it except for my family. The super obnoxious kid always got in trouble. I was never once suspected. When I was around 5 or 6, my mom and dad were fighting just about every day. Well, I was napping on the couch when my mom came in very upset and she shook me awake. She asked me if I saw the girl my dad brought home. I've always felt terrible for this BC. I hadn't seen anyone but my dad that whole day. I'm pretty sure he was just playing video games like usual. But for some reason in my sleepy kid brain I answered yes. I said she was with him in that room. I'm honestly not sure why I lied like that but they got a divorce shortly after and I always felt like it was my fault. Until I recently found out my little sister is actually my half-sister but that's a whole other story. Edit. For clarification, my dad had been cheating with my mom's sister and my mom was cheating with one of their friends to get back at him. She thought he was cheating with a different girl but found out later it was my aunt. Honestly, their relationship was on its way out. I don't feel bad about it now since a few years ago we found out my little sister is my half-sister from the affair my mom had. Funny, light-hearted story from my childhood. My little brother was in the shower. I could hear him singing. I put a coat on backwards, and a stocking cap pulled over my face, and waited outside the bathroom door. He opened the door, still singing, and dancing kinda, and I did the Frankenstein thing, arms out, moaning up. He screamed and fell backwards knocking the toilet completely over. Water went everywhere, the top of the toilet tank broke, shower curtain ripped down, and him laying on the floor in the middle of all this. I ran back down the hall, coat and hat off, and sauntered back casually. By then my mother and father and our sisters were there, and everyone is like, you know, what the hell? I've heard him tell this story as proof of the existence of ghosts. To this day, little feller is now a 52-year-old bank manager with 2 kids. He believes in ghosts. I don't feel a bit bad. Cutting off my dad was the best decision I've made. I hope it kills him inside every day to not know how his only child and only grandchild are doing. I tried for years to have a relationship with him since age 10 until 18. From 10 to 13 he would tell me he wished I would have died when I was sick as a kindergartner because I wouldn't have tattled and ruined his marriage to my mom. I tried multiple times but was unsuccessful. I still tried to have a relationship with him for my mom, to help her financially, and would visit him for months. He'd keep me locked in a closet for hours at age 14. From 16-18 he thought throwing money around would help me but I was already working by then and it didn't matter. I still have my daily battle where I ask myself if he's right or not but I see my kid and I can't imagine thinking such vile things about them at that age like my dad did about me. My grandmother had a stroke when I was around 9 and it ruined her. She could barely talk, had very little short-term memory, she couldn't do anything by herself, and her brain just continued to rot over the next few years. By the time I was 11, she shambled about. She couldn't speak, she couldn't eat without a feeding tube. Eventually she lost the ability to walk and recognize people, or things. She didn't respond to anyone or anything. She was gone. Mentally, her body required around-the-clock care to keep it functioning, even after multiple heart issues and her body constantly trying to die. Some of my family continued to care for her body. They refused to do the right thing and kept reviving her body time and time again, year after year. So much of their lives were wasted taking care of what remained of her body. We even moved to be closer so my mom could help. It sickened me. It was a dark cloud over everyone who knew her. And it served as a constant reminder of how fragile we really are. If she had actually still existed in that body, I'd have helped. I'd have visited her and comforted her the best I could. But even as a child, I knew better. My grandfather and a few of my aunts kept her shell of a body alive until I was in my 20s. For most of my teenage years, her body was a brain-dead corpse. I wished for years that the stroke had killed her because it would have been a hell of a lot more merciful. It sounds harsh, but I truly did love my grandmother. I was her favorite as a kid. She was a mean and sometimes cruel woman, but for me she had a soft spot. I loved spending time with her, throwing bread to the neighborhood birds, her telling me stories of her life. I miss her, but because of what they did to her, it's hard for me to think about her. It haunts me. When my grandpa was on his deathbed, he admitted to killing fellow Marines in the Vietnam War for torturing and raping young girls. Most of our family doesn't know. Edit. Wow, didn't expect this to blow up. Lol. Thank you for all the awards. My grandpa was a pretty cool guy, very calm and mellow, so my mom and I were shocked when he admitted this to us. He was a gunsmith his whole life and was very proud of being a Marine, but the guilt he carried from the war made him believe he was being punished in the end. He died a really painful and traumatic death that I would never wish on anybody. I hope it lets him rest easier in peace. That the majority of you commend what he did. I certainly never held any qualms about it. My great-grandpa told us the same thing. He said he walked in on his Marine friends raping women and children and blew all their heads off. His words, "He never let my parents leave us with anyone but my great-grandma and him BC. He was so afraid of what piece of shit perverts were lurking out there." 2 days before my dad took his life he called me telling me what he wanted to do. He had been calling me and telling me how depressed he was for months and I was sick of hearing it. And I hung up on him. A broken bar. I hung up on my suicidal father. He then killed himself on my 17th birthday. Everybody in the family thinks it was coincidence that he took his life on my birthday, but I know the real reason. I've never told a single member of my family as I know they would blame me, especially my brother. Ever since he took his life I have this recurring nightmare of seeing my dad in a grocery store passing at the other end of the aisle. He's pushing an empty shopping cart and briefly looks at me at the other end of the aisle but keeps going. When I run to where he was, he's now at the other end aisle. Rinse and repeat until wake up screaming. Some secrets will haunt you until you die.